Welcome to part 2 of our must-have PSP RPG series. If your favourite game isn't on the list, it's most likely included in part 1. There'll be a link to that video in the description below. Key of Heaven is an Oriental-themed action RPG that went by largely unnoticed upon its release. The narrative sees 5 clans vying for power over the region in which it is set, with players assuming the role of a man known as Shinbu, who is a member of one of these clans. You are tasked with retrieving several swords from each of them in order to become a master, and as you would expect with most action RPGs, you'll find yourself taking on a range of enemies, acquiring items through exploration, as well as leveling up and upgrading the huge amount of weapons and armor that are at your disposal. But where Key of Heaven truly shines is within its fighting system. It's surprisingly deep and allows the player to chain combos together and learn new strings by combining various forms of scrolls. Key of Heaven is a true must-have on the PSP. Everyone should play this game as it offers up one of the finest experiences available on the system. Growlancer is an RPG that excels in the many elements that comprise the genre. Its narrative, world and gameplay all come together to create something truly unique and special that is bound to satisfy fans' expectations and in some cases even surpass them. The story centers around a young man known as Criminal and 4 warring factions that comprise the world as a whole. It all starts off quite innocently, but soon evolves into a tale that sees the fate of the entire world and its population in the balance. With nearly 40 separate character endings and 3 defined routes in which the game can be completed, it promotes subsequent playthroughs that really helps the overall replay value of the game. It's essentially a tactical RPG, but unlike most, it doesn't see your party occupying a grid during battle. You are completely free to move around and strategically place each character to perform a wide range of abilities. These abilities all revolve around something known as the ring weapon system that dictates which skills can be learned, allowing the player to experiment with a wide range of options before settling upon something that suits them best. With its complex and compelling story, thoughtful gameplay and catchy soundtrack, Growlancer is well worth picking up if you're looking for a new RPG to get into. Wild Arms XF is not your typical strategy RPG. Most games of its kind require one and only one real tactical decision, that being to destroy all the enemies on the map at any cost. XF on the other hand requires you to think on a whole new level, mainly due to its difficulty, that at times can become quite frustrating if I'm being honest, but by taking advantage of the whole spectrum of abilities at your call, it truly comes into its own and demands that the player take their time with each and every situation instead of just mindlessly attacking to gain victory. Visually, the experience is quite simple in its presentation, but in my eyes quite effective in conveying its world and the several characters in which you meet. The bright and colourful nature really adds a certain charm to each environment, unit and NPC, which all receive the same level of love and care that results in an instantly recognisable style that the adventure can call its own. To sum it up, if you're looking for a run-of-the-mill strategy RPG, Wild Arms XF will not be for you. However, if you require a challenging, rewarding and thought-provoking adventure to lose yourself within, XF is more than up to the task. Brave Story New Traveler is an RPG that introduces players to a young man named Tetsuya. After his friend succumbs to a mysterious illness, he is visited by a voice that grants him the opportunity to save her. You are tasked with locating 5 gems scattered throughout this kingdom in order to restore your friend to good health. Now, the first thing that will strike many are the incredible visuals that really show what the PSP was capable of when in the hands of the right developers. Each character, location and enemy all come to life in a way that helps the experience excel. Gameplay wise, it is your standard RPG fare with battles playing out in a turn-based fashion. As you would expect, a whole range of abilities are afforded to each party member who can all be leveled up over the course of the adventure and catered to your specific style of play through the skills in which they can learn. But the standout combat feature has to be something known as unity skills, which allow the player to team up with party members and unleash devastating amounts of damage upon the enemy. For those that love turn-based RPGs, intoxicating visuals and smooth animations, you simply just have to get a hold of this game. The adventure begins with players assuming the role of a young prince known as Petro. After learning the fate of his long-lost mother, he sets out on a journey to ultimately find her and reunite. Now the narrative has to be the standout aspect of the experience. It deals with overcoming difficulties, making friends, and essentially growing up. But that's not all that it gets right, the gameplay delivers as well. The entire kingdom is your playground. It is absolutely huge and is home to a wide range of locations, as well as meaningful NPCs that flesh out the backstory. But where it truly comes into its own is within battle, which is all turn-based in nature and empowers the player with a whole host of both magical and physical based attacks. There's a ton to learn and unlock throughout the journey, and it's sure to keep fans of the genre as well as newcomers alike completely satisfied. The Third Birthday is the third entry in the Parasite Eve series that began life on the original PlayStation. It is a stark contrast to the original adventures and instead presents itself as an over-the-shoulder shooter, but retains many of the RPG aspects that were so prevalent in the previous iterations. You once again take on the role of Aya, with the adventure being broken up into a series of missions that can be replayed over and over again. At the end of each you receive a score that determines how many bounty points you have earned for your troubles. These points are essentially a currency that can be spent on further upgrading your weapons and equipment. It all helps even the odds against the onslaught of enemies that come your way. You'll be earning XP for not only Aya, but each and every weapon in your possession, and through the use of several items known as OE clips. New statistical boosts and abilities can also be learned which help you evolve Aya into a character that suits your style. And these abilities will be coming in handy as the gameplay is truly frantic, and due to the PSP setup it can be quite tricky at first, but it all soon falls into place with an automatic lock-on system that manages to make life a lot easier. Although never reaching the highs of the first entries, the Third Birthday is still a great adventure that should be experienced by anyone looking for a challenging but rewarding RPG. Innocent Sin on the PSP is a retelling of the original PlayStation version of Persona 2. I myself, being a huge fan of the series, only recently managed to play it, and I for one can gladly recommend it as not only a great entry in the franchise, but one of the best RPGs on the system to boot. It all revolves around a young man known as Tatsuya, a high school student who along with a group of friends gets pulled into a dark and at times disturbing adventure by a villainous character known as the Joker. The narrative is quite possibly one of the best aspects of the experience, so I don't want to say too much in case I spoil it for you, but rest assured it will not disappoint. Like any RPG though, gameplay is the most fundamental aspect to its success, and Innocent Sin excels in this department as well. It all revolves around the use of demon-like creatures known as personas in battle, and something known as the rumor system outside of fighting that has the potential to steer events in the character's favour. Like other entries in the series, these personas can be fused together to make even more powerful allies to aid you in the turn-based battles. That soon becomes one of the most intriguing parts of the adventure. Spending hours upon hours to ultimately build an unstoppable team is quite easily one of the finest aspects of the experience, and with so many possibilities, you'll always be finding something new. If you're a fan of the series but have never gone back to see how it all started, Innocent Sin is the perfect way to do so. Tales of Eternia is a remake of the PlayStation 1 game that unfortunately never got a chance to shine. The adventure revolves around two worlds known as Celestial and Inferior. Upon learning that the worlds are slowly drifting into each other, a young girl named Meredy is sent to Inferior to essentially warn them of the impending catastrophe. Upon crashing into the world, she runs into Reed, who serves as the game's main protagonist. As with most RPGs, they are made up of many elements that manage to bring life to the world in which they are set. This is where Tales of Eternia truly excels. The amount of NPCs and locations you'll be running into manage to add a real weight to each environment and make the events that unfold all the more believable thanks to the lovable cast of characters at the centre of it all. The combat system plays out on a 2D plane, with the player having a wide selection of options at their fingertips, the main one being a simple combo attack that soon opens up to far more devastating abilities and even summons that have the potential to turn the tides of a fight in the blink of an eye. It's a surprisingly deep system that allows you to experiment with what is on offer and slowly settle into a groove. It's quite simply my favourite aspect of the game, so if you're on the lookout for an enjoyable and deep RPG on the PSP, look no further than Tales of Eternia. Star Ocean: The First Departure is essentially a remake of the Super Nintendo version that released way back in 1996. It follows three main characters known as Roddick, Millie and Doan, who reside upon a planet named Roke. The group mainly operate as protectors against bandits, and even though content, they still long for adventure. This wish is granted when word of a virus reaches their home, and they set out to ultimately get to the bottom of it and find a way to cure those infected. In order to do so, a time-bending journey ensues and sees our heroes travelling back in time to find a solution. One thing that has always stood out to me about Star Ocean is the battle system, and First Departure is no exception. It's all presented in real time, with a series of combos being afforded to the player, as well as character-specific abilities that can all be nurtured and leveled up over the course of the game. An array of weapons, equipment and items all play a huge role in overcoming some of the more demanding situations that the game presents. It's not overly difficult, but it possesses a nice amount of challenge that is bound to satisfy fans of the genre and those looking for a compelling and rewarding experience. Valkyrie Profile Lenneth is a remake of a game that originally appeared on the PS1. It manages to mix up several genres together, mainly platforming, puzzles and RPG, into a truly unforgettable experience. It sees players taking up the role of Lenneth to essentially choose fallen heroes and deliver them to heaven. It ties heavily into Norse mythology and centers upon a war of the gods known as Ragnarok. Traversing primarily takes place from a side-scrolling perspective and involves overcoming several puzzles in order to progress. But what steals the show is the intricate and challenging combat system that manages to add an extra level of strategy than most other RPGs. It all centers around an energy bar that slowly rises the more you attack, with each party member being assigned to a face button on the controller. Once it hits 100, you have the ability to unleash a variety of finishing attacks and chain several together, which soon become a real joy to pull off, making it a game that well and truly deserves a spot in any RPG fan's collection. Well, that does it for today's video. Don't forget to hit subscribe to stay up to date on future videos, and as always, thanks for watching.